Imagine waking up. You're maybe 15 years old in this small windowless room, and the air is just thick with the smell of ale. Well, sweat, fear, and maybe some old olive oil. Cold stone walls. You hear laughter, like far off from the main house, but it's a sound you dread. Your whole body aches. You've got bruises, purple and yellow, blooming across your ribs, really ugly, fresh from last night. And the iron shackle on your ankle, it's rubbed the skin raw. Dried blood there. Time just, ooh, it moves differently when you're not seen as a person anymore, when you're property. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. This is not the ancient Greece we usually learn about, not the shining philosophy and democracy. Today we're really looking into the shadows. Behind the marble columns, behind all the famous intellectual talk, we're trying to uncover the human cost, the part of the story that often gets left out. The reality of slavery and, well, one of history's most celebrated civilizations.
And that's really our mission here in this deep dive. We want to challenge those common ideas about history. We're digging up these forgotten stories of survival, but also immense suffering. And it's not just about what happened. We're looking at what the sources tell us about how dehumanization becomes systemic, even in a society we praise. What can we learn from these hidden truths? Because, honestly, they still feel relevant today.
Right. And that path to becoming property, it often started way before the victims really got what was happening to them. Think about families in these little Greek villages just scraping by, living right on the edge. Maybe a bad harvest or the father gets injured, someone dies. Anything could push a family in debt they just couldn't escape. And the people they owed money to, they often wanted payment in people. We hear about these individual tragedies, but what about the bigger picture, the economics of it?
Well, what the sources really show is that this wasn't just bad luck hitting families one by one. It was almost an economically engineered system. Historians point out, a single bad harvest could wipe out 30–50% of a farmer's assets. Debt bondage became almost inevitable for many rural poor. So this created a pretty consistent supply, almost predictable, for the slave markets in the cities. Imagine, a really bad drought scenario. Weeks of just brutal sun, crops wither, the olives shrivel up, the wells run dry, and families face these impossible choices no parent should ever have to make. First, sell the animals, right? Then maybe jewelry, family heirlooms. And when that's gone, well, heartbreakingly, they start looking at their children.
And that's when the slave merchants show up. They come in these villages like vultures, basically sensing disaster. They've got chains, ropes, ledgers full of names and prices, and they offer cash right away for these long-term contracts. Maybe, say, 20 years of a kid's life, their service, for enough silver to feed the rest of the family through winter. I mean, it could almost sound like a decent deal when you're literally facing starvation.
It's profoundly awful to think about it from the perspective of, a 12-year-old kid in that situation. They don't understand the math of desperation. All they see is their father can't look them in the eye while he's haggling over their price.
Yeah.
Their mother turns away while some merchant checks their teeth like they're livestock.
Like a horse, yeah.
Exactly. They hear words like promising or good for household work, but they don't grasp the real meaning yet. The merchant counts out the silver coins, each one basically a year of this child's life, and then the lies start. Often from their own parents, saying it's just temporary, it's an opportunity, you'll come back rich. Sweet lies, but, poisonous. It really makes you ask how a society can get so desperate that a market for people just thrives.
So from these villages, the journey to the city starts, and it's just a nightmare. Chained necks, blistered feet, you're now part of this human caravan. Dozens of boys, young men, all linked by iron chains and, well, despair. The older ones, they've figured out hope is just setting yourself up for disappointment later. The younger ones might cry for their mothers, but they stop eventually. Either their voice gives out or the guards beat it out of them. They walk through these beautiful landscapes, but their whole world is just shrunk down to the length of chain between them and the next person. At night, chained to stakes. And sometimes merchants bring visitors to look over the merchandise. Men with soft hands, calculating eyes. They walk around like farmers, checking cattle, poking, prodding, evaluating people for different kinds of work. And you learn pretty quickly to spot the different buyers. Some guys want muscle, endurance for farm work. Others look for compliance, intelligence, maybe a kind of fragility, suggesting you won't cause trouble in the house. But then there's this third category. Everyone learns to dread them. These men, they dress really well, talk fancy, smell of expensive perfume, wine, rings on their fingers, and when they examine you, their touch just lingers. Makes your skin crawl.
Yeah.
They're looking for something specific. Youth, beauty, nothing to do with work, everything to do with, well, pleasure. And this whole grim process leads, of course, to the slave markets in Athens itself. What was that like?
Oh, the Athens slave market. It was just an assault on every sense, and our sources, they really help us picture the scale of it. Archaeological finds, like in the Agora area, suggest this constant flow. Historians estimate maybe hundreds of deals happening daily in peak times. It shows it was an economic engine, really fueled by human misery, not just isolated cruelty.
Hundreds daily.
Yeah. So first, the sound hits you. Hundreds of voices, haggling, crying, pleading. And the smell. Unwashed bodies, fear, sweat, urine, and just this stench of dehumanization, you know. Then you see it. Naked bodies lined up like goods, children barely old enough to walk, holding onto their mothers, just looking confused. They clean and oil the captives before selling them. Not for kindness, obviously. Clean merchandise just gets a better price.
Right.
The auctioneer's shouting out descriptions, age, where they're from, physical shape. He might mention a pleasing appearance or gentle temperament. Those are code words. Certain buyers lean in when they hear that. Predatory interest. Imagine standing there, frozen, trying to disappear inside yourself while strangers' hands are all over your body. You're not a person. You're an object up for sale.
Right.
Deeply unsettling. So the winning bidder in the story we're following is this man, Lysander. Middle-aged, looks well-fed, soft hands, never done a day of hard labor.
Yeah.
Wears expensive silk, that deep purple color that just screams wealth and status. And the way he looks at the young captive, it makes you want to run, but you can't. Chains. Lysander owns this huge house in a rich part of Athens. Grand place, marble columns, painted walls, fancy mosaics of gods and heroes. Bigger than a whole village back home. And servants are rushing around everywhere. And you quickly realize a lot of them are young men, all handsome in their own way. And they all have that same look, that resigned despair. It starts to feel like the actual face of being captive. Running this place, this sort of lavish but creepy household, is the overseer, Demetrius. He used to be a slave himself. Bought young, worked his way up by being absolutely ruthless.
That's a key detail.
Yeah. Now he manages the household slaves with an iron fist. He spells out the rules very clearly. Fed twice a day. Barley porridge, then bread and olives. Clean clothes once a week. Bathe, eat, sleep exactly when told. Only speak when spoken to. Never look a free person in the eye. And the big one, never refuse an order, no matter what it is. Then comes the chilling part. You're here to serve the master and his guests in whatever way they need. Could be pouring wine, serving food, cleaning rooms, or providing entertainment. And the nature of this entertainment, Demetrius says with this nasty little smile, that will become clear in time.
It's really striking how Demetrius, having been enslaved himself, uses that intimate knowledge of vulnerability to control others. Our sources often highlight this former slaves becoming the most effective tools of dehumanization because they knew exactly how to break someone's spirit, how to guarantee compliance.
Right.
He tells them, you know, resistance just brings pain, but compliance, that might get you rewards. Better food, a warmer sleeping spot, maybe even tiny personal things. This psychological game, it's as strong as any physical chain. You meet the other slaves. Marcus, about your age, but his eyes look so pained. Alexios, older, scarred. And Philemon, he's barely 14, but looks haunted, much older. He used to be from a merchant family. And it's Philemon who quietly explains what really happens during those parties, the symposiums.
You know, what's so jarring when you read these accounts is the huge difference between this reality and the image we have of ancient Greece. We celebrate the symposium, right? The drinking party where smart guys discuss philosophy, politics, art.
Exactly, the intellectual hub.
Yeah, sophisticated events. We remember them for these amazing conversations between the greatest minds. But the reality for the enslaved people there was often terrifying, especially when the wine started flowing and the guests wanted more. Intimate entertainment. The slaves weren't just serving food and drink. Chillingly, they were expected to serve themselves. How did these supposed great minds square that circle?
That is the absolute core contradiction, isn't it? And the sources show this really fascinating, though disturbing, kind of mental gymnastics. The philosophers basically put slaves in a completely separate moral box. It wasn't an accident, it was structural justification. For them, virtues like justice, honor, love, those applied between free citizens, between equals. Slaves, being property, were just outside that moral framework, almost like they were beyond human empathy. So a symposium might start off very formal, discussing democracy, maybe Socrates, but as the night goes on, the wine flows. The whole tone shifts dramatically. Philosophical debates turn into crude jokes, body stories, and the slaves who were just silently serving suddenly become the focus. They exist in this moral vacuum where basic human dignity just doesn't apply.
It starts small, right? Little requests. Pour wine for this guy, massage that guy's shoulders, feed grapes to the man over there. Each thing seems minor, maybe, but the young slave learns to read the signals fast, how conversations hush when he comes near, the touches that linger too long, nothing to do with serving wine, the way certain guests just watch him, that predatory interest. And then it happens. The first time he's picked for special service, an older guest, old enough to be his grandfather, asks him to sit with him on his couch. Seems friendly at first, asks questions, but his hand is on the shoulder, then it moves down the back, then lower. Protests, ignored if he struggles. The other guests just laugh. And just like that, in the most brutal way, his childhood is over.
It's such a stark example of what we call moral compartmentalization. The very same men debating virtue and justice during the day felt absolutely no qualms about using young slaves for pleasure at night. Poets writing beautiful lines about love and honor treated their human property like living toys. Use them, discard them.
Unbelievable.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it just highlights how deeply embedded this idea was. Slaves were in a different moral category. This contradiction, it wasn't accidental, it was structural. The very leisure that let free citizens pursue philosophy and art was often built directly on the backs of slave labor, making this hypocrisy kind of foundational to their whole society.
So over the next few months, it becomes clear that first night, that was actually mild compared to what happens regularly. Some guests have specific tastes, particular cruelties they like. Others almost compete. Who could break a slave spirit the most completely? And the overseer, Demetrius, he encourages it. He knows broken slaves are easier to control.
Right, compliance.
The psychological tactics they use are sophisticated and cruel. Isolation is a big one. Cut off from everyone you ever knew. Unpredictability, too. You never know when you'll be called, what they'll want. Constant fear wears you down. But maybe the worst is the destruction of identity. They give you a new name, forbid your language, your customs. They systematically try to erase everything that made you. Well, you. What does this tell us about the people doing this?
It tells us something deeply unsettling. That the perpetrators, often the supposed cream of Athenian society, did these things not just out of simple malice, but from this profound belief in their own superiority and the slaves' inherent inferiority. Our sources actually mention names. Like Dionysius, a politician known for talking about justice, but who apparently loved humiliating slaves. Or Cleomenes, a merchant praised for being generous, who had a taste for violence.
Wow.
And maybe most disturbing, a philosopher called Sophist, a name tied to, challenging norms and debating ideas. Here he is writing about ethics, but behind closed doors, he's a monster. Justifying cruelty with philosophy, it really highlights this chilling part of human nature, doesn't it? Our ability to build these intellectual shields to rationalize horrific acts, especially when the victim is seen as other.
And the long-term damage to the person, it's devastating. The slave learns survival tricks they could never have imagined before. Reading tiny signs, mastering this kind of psychological absence, like you look compliant on the outside, or you retreat deep inside yourself, or maybe they can't touch your spirit.
A coping mechanism.
Yeah, but survival costs so much. Every compromise, every time you submit, it chips away at something vital inside. It reinforces the idea that you're powerless, worthless, disposable. The boy who used to run laughing in the field becomes this hollow-eyed young man moving through life like a ghost in his own body.
Exactly. And often it's not even the big, dramatic violence that hits hardest. It's the casual cruelty. A guest hitting a slave just because they're bored, interrupting poetry reading to demand something degrading. This constant low-level attack on your dignity just disconnects you from your own humanity. It's like a slow erosion of the self.
Then, maybe in the third year, something just breaks. Something inside you didn't even know could break. It happens during this big symposium, celebrating some military victory. The guests are young aristocrats, barely older than the slave himself. Drunk on wine, drunk on power they inherited. They've invented some game, a contest to see who can get the most entertaining reactions out of their human toys. And as this degrading thing unfolds, something just shifts fundamentally inside him. He stops seeing himself as a person enduring awful things. He starts seeing himself the way they see him. Just a thing. A thing for their amusement. That last piney thread connecting him back to the boy he used to be, it just snaps. And this psychological death, it's almost a relief in a twisted way. If there's no hope, no dignity left to protect, then surrendering doesn't hurt anymore. He becomes the perfect slave, anticipates needs, takes any abuse without resisting. Yeah, the overseers notice. They reward him with small things. Better clothes, maybe more food, a cell with an actual window. This is the grim economy of it all. The house runs on a constant supply of fresh victims. Young slaves usually don't last more than a few years. They get broken, or they get too old for the master's taste.
Use up.
Exactly. Some die from disease, injury, others get sold off to really brutal places, gladiator schools, the mines, basically a slow death sentence.
And here's where the irony becomes just profound. The protagonist, now this broken young man, sometimes goes with Demetrius to the slave markets to help evaluate the new merchandise. He gives these cold, technical assessments of young boys based on his own horrific experience, how suitable they are. He sees the terror in their eyes and, for a while, feels nothing, just numb. But then, one time at the market, he sees an boy who looks exactly like he did. Same dark hair, same terrified eyes, and seeing that reflection just it stirs something deep inside that deadness behind his ribs, a feeling so sharp and painful he actually stumbles. It's not hope returning, it's just this agonizing realization that some tiny fragment of who he used to be is still there. What does that moment tell us, though, about the human spirit?
It tells us that even the deepest wounds can't completely wipe out who you were, I guess. And the answer to whether those fragments matter comes later. During another symposium, this one's quieter. Older men, philosophers, politicians, seriously discussing justice, the ideal state. Our protagonist, now a young man, is just silently serving wine, listening. They're debating if virtue can be taught, or if some people are just born inferior, naturally suited for slavery.
Wow, the hypocrisy.
Right. And in that moment, it hits him with absolute clarity. These men who rape children, who torture the helpless, they're debating virtue, while he, their victim, stands there holding their wine. Their fancy philosophy doesn't excuse their cruelty, it makes it worse. They're educated monsters who've just rationalized everything. Years pass like this. In this state of clear-eyed despair, he's around 25 now. His usefulness is fading. So he's sold to a mining operation, the place slaves go to die. Slowly. Brutally. And if we tie this back to the bigger picture, it really becomes about the weight of small acts, small kindnesses, and the ultimate choices you can make even when everything seems lost. As he's about to be shipped off to the mines, Marcus, another slave, comes to his cell on his last night. He presses something into his hand, a small piece of sharpened metal. Crude, but effective. Could open a lock, maybe, or end a life.
Exactly. Marcus doesn't say anything, but the meaning is crystal clear. You get to choose how your story ends. But the young man makes a different choice. He hides the weapon, hides it where another slave might find it later. He passes on that gift of options Marcus gave him, making sure maybe someone else's story can still be written. And even in the mines, this horrible place, a kind of new, rough society forms. Based on helping each other out, remembering names, remembering stories, he dies quietly after a while as the body just gives out. But his story doesn't die with him. It becomes part of this oral history carried on by the others who promised to remember his name.
Stories like this, they don't really have neat endings, do they? They just echo down through the generations. Whispered in the shadows where power doesn't like to look, they remind us that behind all the great achievements of any civilization, there are countless unnamed victims, people whose suffering often paid for those achievements. The same culture that gave us democracy, theater, philosophy, art, also normalized the complete dehumanization of whole groups of people.
And it absolutely forces us to ask ourselves, are similar systems still operating today? Maybe they're hidden better, sanitized, by layers of laws and complicated economics. But the basic dynamic, powerful people exploiting the powerless, societies building comfort on someone else's suffering, that hasn't changed. Our sources show us this kind of moral blindness. It let people traffic children for exploitation while others debated abstract ideas about consent. It's how think about pharmaceutical companies creating addiction epidemics while funding mental health research. Or how technology, meant to connect us, becomes a tool for preying on the vulnerable.
Right. Modern parallels.
Exactly. That compartmentalization that allowed Greek intellectuals to torture slaves while writing about virtue. It's the same psychology, really, that lets us today enjoy cheap goods possibly made by child labor while we advocate for human rights. The question isn't if these things still happen. They do. Constantly. Everywhere. Hidden in plain sight because we collectively choose to look away. The real question is, are we going to continue that ancient tradition of moral blindness? Or are we finally going to admit that the price of our civilization has always been paid by people who had no say in the deal? Those marble halls, they still echo with his cries. The beautiful mosaics, they still hide the stains of innocent blood. And somewhere, right now, in our own gleaming cities, in our own sophisticated systems, the same ancient horrors are wearing new masks, speaking new languages, but the essential evil, it's unchanged. We are them. They are us. The only difference is time. And time has never stopped human cruelty. It's just become an excuse for forgetting.